and welcome to All Things Conflict with me, your host, Maria Arpa. And actually today I'm going to talk to you solo about giving up power and control. What do we mean by power and control? So one of the things I'm often called to do is to come into communities or workplaces or organisations or families and help to reset the way conflict is managed in those communities. Often by the time I've been called in, things are a mess. Things are, conflict is usually at an all-time high. Gossiping, side-taking, adversarial processes, perhaps even legal processes are in place, and the pressure cooker is set to explode. And so I talk about this as putting in the plumbing. So it's like someone built a house or an office or a building of some description, and everything, the taps and the sink and the toilet and the central heating, all looks beautiful, but actually it doesn't drain anywhere. There's nowhere for it to drain. And so nobody put in a sewage system to remove all the waste. And by the time I've been asked to come in, generally what's happened is the sewage is coming up through the floorboards, and there's a huge amount of mopping up to do before you can even then put the plumbing in. And I like that analogy because a lot of what we do when we're in conflict is actually, it's sewage. It serves, it's just waste product. And it takes up a huge amount of resource. Being in an adversarial position and being in an argument with other people uses up a huge amount of personal and organisational resource. So when I go into an organisation, the first thing we do is we just listen. We talk and we listen and we understand and we get a picture of what's going on. And clearly I've developed a model called the dialogue roadmap, and we have our ways of doing that. But the first thing really is understanding from everyone's point of view how they are experiencing the current situation. And that involves listening at every level, which is not the same as taking a brief from the senior management team or from the head of the household. And my starting point is never assume nothing, be open to hearing anything, and come into it, okay, although I have skill, wisdom, experience, knowledge, been around the block many times, it's still coming with innocence and naivety to allow the energy of the situation to show itself and see what is manifesting through the people at all levels of that community. Interestingly enough, what's quite difficult in the world we live in is that most commissioners, or organisations or people that ask me to come in, what they want me to do is tell them the end result and work backwards and tell how we're going to push people through some kind of process in order to get to this point that's been predetermined. And actually, that's just another form of control. And so it can be quite challenging for an organisation to understand that we're going to begin where we begin, and we're going to be open to wherever this takes us. Because usually by the time things have got to this stage, the people on the ground floor are feeling oppression, or they're experiencing a tightness or a tension or a conflict that means that they're full up They're full up. And so what we need to do is we need to allow things to open up. And that's quite difficult for organisations that are working on rules and policies and procedures and following everything to the letter. And yet, if your policies and procedures do not focus as much on relationships as it does, the tasks or the rules or the laws, then you're probably always going to end up in this place, just to varying degrees of pain. So one of the things I try to manage and deal with is power and control in these situations. And in most of our mainstream society, what we're dealing with is power over. In our hierarchical systems, one person has power over another person. They have power over, they could have power over how their career is going to go. There are things that they can do and say that could actually ruin someone's life. And I know that's quite extreme, but it does happen. And then there's power over where the people that hold the purse strings believe that actually what they want to do is manipulate the situation into what they want because actually it's their money. And you might say, well, what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that as long as that's very clear and the truth is out there, giving people choice to be in that relationship or not. And of course, I must caveat that by saying I'm talking about Western mainstream society, not other countries that run under dictatorships, etc. I mean, that's a whole nother topic. So power over is incredibly toxic and will always take us to a bad place. It will always take us to a bad place. It will create tensions. Even if we think we can suppress it, then that which we suppress will leak out of us. And it will leak out of us either in our physical behaviours, it will leak out of us in our mental health and actually in our physical well-being. Because energy can't be suppressed. It has to flow, and it will flow in a loving and joyful way, or it will flow in a negative and destructive way. So when we put a group of people together in a workplace or a family or a community or, a golf club or, whatever that is, what we're trying to do is figure out what is the frequency that everyone can manage to vibrate at and move along together. And when we try to control that, we're actually suppressing things that need to be out there and said. So the first move that I want to try and make is from power over to power with. When we engage in power over as leaders or as whoever we are in that hierarchical system, what happens is we're taking on far more responsibility, believing that we can control the situation, believing that we have to assert power over other people can leave us in an extremely lonely and vulnerable place and actually feed the very thing that we're trying to reassure ourselves of. Because if we're using control and manipulation and power to influence how the people around us exist and behave in our presence or in our community, then we never get to find out whether actually we can be loved for who we are. We never get to find out if actually there is trust in the world and whether we really are safe. So actually exerting power control using manipulation actually feeds the very thing we're trying to solve. And that for me is the irony of it. But when we move to power with, what we do is we allow trust, we allow safety, we allow mutuality and authenticity to arise within the group so that we can actually deal with the real issues that we are going to confront as humans. I am dark and light, you are dark and light. We shine a light in the shadows so that the shadows aren't manifesting themselves through toxic and dysfunctional behaviours. And so for those of you that have never really heard this stuff before, or think I'm a bit mad or whatever, and think this is all cuckoo stuff, I just want you to stay with me for a little bit longer, because there is a place of surrender in which what I really find is my inner power that doesn't need me to have power over anybody else. I mean, the idea that you can tell another human being what to do is preposterous. I mean, I can tell you what to do, but in the end, people will do what they need to do. I may be able to control someone or keep them under my spell for a period of time, but eventually it won't go anywhere good. Eventually it will destruct. So when I say surrender, I don't mean give up and become subservient. No, what I mean by surrender is surrender to my light, to my inner power, to my understanding that I am a human being that can radiate love. And okay, if that's alien and sounds a million miles away, then it's like anything else. I have to start somewhere. Start somewhere by understanding what shaped me, what happened to me, what was in my environment, where have I been, what do I tell myself about the world, who put those thoughts there in the first place, how did I develop to get to where I am? And a really good question is the same set of beliefs, is what I'm telling myself and have told myself up to now, are those the same skills and wisdom that are going to take me to a new place? And generally the answer is no. So what is the new set of skills? What is it that I need to surrender to take me to this other place? And how will we know unless we talk about it? And that's what the dialogue roadmap is all about. The dialogue roadmap is a structured way to have deep dialogue within my community, or just within myself actually, but also within my community, where we can unleash the frequency of love. And again, don't get me wrong, this is not woo-woo stuff. I mean, hopefully you can tell from just listening to me, I'm not sort of head in the clouds. It doesn't mean that I don't take action. It doesn't mean that I don't address injury, loss or harm. It doesn't mean that I put up with, whatever's coming my way. But what we're doing is we're harnessing a power with, so that we can creatively and jointly steer ourselves together to the place that we want to get to. So we come out of the adversarial, competitive, win-lose, right-wrong mentality, and we move to a creative heart mentality. And sometimes I go into communities and we can only get so far because the people in charge, whatever that means, believe that they want this. They believe that they want this well-being. They believe that they want this sort of trust, growth, this sense of mutuality and solidarity. And when it gets to the point where those holding the power or holding the purse strings need to take that last step into surrender, they actually can't do it. They can't do it. They can't give up because the power has been so seductive. The power has held them and protected them. Although, as I say, it actually feeds the wrong stuff. But the belief is that holding on to that power keeps me protected. And actually it doesn't. What happens is there's just more and more fires to put out. And when that happens, there's a truth, but at least everyone gets to see where it sits. Now, again, I've mentioned hierarchical communities or hierarchical organisations. And that doesn't mean, when I talk about, I'm not saying that hierarchy's wrong. It's important, it is important that I may be somebody in my community that has additional responsibilities. Not everybody operates at the same level. Not everyone's motivated by the same thing. Some people just want to do the bit that they're supposed to do and go home and forget about it. Other people want to move things in a certain way or innovate. So we will have people with additional responsibilities or, greater kind of parameters to operate in. And yet in the system that I'm advocating, we do all of that by consent, because everybody understands where they are in the system. They're not just plonked into it and told, know your place. And one of the ways that has shown up that I've been really joyful about is when an organisation says, well, actually, we produce nuts and bolts, and we need to get from A to B, otherwise we can't exist. And we need to get from A to B within a time and money resource kind of limitation. And so I don't want to interfere with that. That's not the point. The point, we can't just suddenly undo everything that we've got going. But how I would look at that is say, okay, so running alongside that, so everybody comes in, people are contracted, they know their place in this, they're coming in to do what they've been contracted to do, however that looks like. And running alongside that, what we have is an informal process that doesn't interrupt the day-to-day, where the members of that community can go at an early stage when things don't feel right to them, or when they believe that something's out of kilter, or there's a dissonance, or something's happening very tangible, or just a feeling, where we can have those conversations, understanding that the machine still needs to turn. And I've seen that happen in a few places, and it's been very successful. So in the end, one of the things I find myself doing is speaking truth to power. And it's not always a great place to be. And the Dialogue Roadmap has taught me a lot more about not being a sledgehammer to crack a nut. It's taught me about gentle ways in which we can support people to come along to change. I'd love to know how you feel about what I've shared. So do like, comment or subscribe. And if you want to continue the conversation, even better. And I hope this has been a little insight, a little crack in the door into some of the things that I do and advocate for. So thank you for listening.